There was
Yep.
there was wildfires. The utility shut down. There was, you name it, revolutions. There was a like a Friday, and then the DA wasn't open,
Of
and
course
Pound
not.
Yard was not open until
County
Monday.
workers.
So literally, like we need our, and it was just carpet for the Model S trunk. You can't like ship people, cars with no carpet in the trunk.
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks weird because you see the all the body stuff. It looks not okay.
I've pulled it out before. It would be rough if that was what you got at delivery.
Yeah,
You might get a few
exactly.
complaints.
Yeah, so we can, we had to wait until we got the truck back from the
I
you have
know
their
at the
numbers?
time, that's not something that could probably be shared, but hearing that now, what an incredible
yeah.
story.
I mean, honestly, if there's so many different reasons that you could possibly imagine.
Yeah, you must have a lot of stories like that too.
Yeah.
In the early
The
days,
full list of all the reasons for supply chain interruptions or internal issues is comedically long, I think. So
Well, I just wanted to take a moment and kind of step back. So the reason we're here, right, is because of the early days of Tesla, right? There's a lot of misinformation.
yeah,
And I know you and I have kind of gone back a little bit over that. And so I thought, this is the time to just potentially set some of the misinformation straight and really just kind of let you speak on how things happened during those days. And so
Sure.
I wanted to step back and just really, what gave you the vision first off to even step into electric vehicles? I think you made a comment one time you were on a date or something like
Yeah.
that. You asked the girl, like,
I guess
"Do you
she
think
wasn't
about
sure it was the date, to be frank. Yeah, when I was actually with Christy Nicholson, who's a writer for Scientific American, and I guess it was like sort of a semi-date. I don't know. We went out to dinner, I guess. So, and I was talking about electric cars a lot. I think I was like 20 years old, yeah. So I asked her some question like, "Do you think about electric cars?" She's like, "No, I don't think about them at all." I said, "I think about them a lot."
So was there more questions after that, or was that a?
that was the end of the date.
No, I mean, yeah, we're still friends today, actually. I
Oh,
think she's
cool.
coming by Austin in a few months or something.
Okay. Very
So I've been thinking about electric cars since I was basically in high school. As just kind of the thing that is like the thing that is sort of kind of the way cars should be if you can just solve range.
Yeah.
So it's not like if you think about it like an internal combustion engine car, it requires a battery and a starter motor just to get started. So it requires an electric motor and a battery just to
Yeah.
get started.
Yeah.
And then there's this incredible kind of Rube Goldberg contraption that all has to work in order for you to get motion. And then most of what you're producing with the fuel is heat. So you've got to get rid of the heat.
Yep.
And then you've got to process the toxic gases. And there's a limit to how well you can process the toxic gases. So it's sort of an odd thing, the internal combustion car. And people will look back on the internal combustion car era as a strange time.
Yeah.
Quaint,
Quaint, yeah.
and quaint and just weird, basically. So it's sort of, we look back on the external combustion era of steam engines as quaint. With this big steam engine chuffing and shoveling the coal and stuff, and you're like, well, you wouldn't really get around like that today, unless,
Yeah.
it's sort of like more of a niche thing in a, some amusement park or, trip down memory lane situation. But like, it would be like weird if you're like shoveling coal into
Today's world.
yeah, shoveling coal into an external combustion steam engine to get around. I mean, it would be like, well, that's pretty weird. And that's how the future will view internal combustion, the same way external combustion is viewed today.
Yeah.
So the issue really, the only thing holding electric cars back was range, and the fundamentals of energy density mean that if you have a lead acid based battery based car, your range is optimistically it's going to be like maybe 70 miles, 80 miles if you really are quite good. Then if you go to something like nickel metal hydride, you've got twice the energy density. So that's going to give you with the same massive pack, somewhere around maybe 160 miles. And then if you go to lithium ion, and there's many varieties of lithium ion. Lithium ion is an incredibly broad description. But without having to go to a super advanced lithium ion, you can get to a 300-mile range pack.
Yeah.
With the same weight. So you're going to get roughly four times the energy density of lead acid, 5 if you go to advanced lithium ion.
And as you go to more advanced lithium ions, more refinement, the cost goes up to further refinement. Is that correct?
Yeah. So the difficulty of getting to as you get to a high energy density lithium ion, you need to change the anode to silicon. So you get a dramatic increase in energy density as you switch the anode to silicon. But the problem with silicon is that it expands and contracts a lot during charge and discharge. So, and in that expansion and contraction, it wants to kind of crumble, and so like mud cracks essentially, is one way to think about it. Yeah. So the problem with a pure silicon anode is that it's very difficult to have it stay together when you charge and discharge it. So then one of the things you can do is to add silicon to the carbon in the typical anode. So a carbon just has only very minor expansion and contraction. So it's easy to maintain a carbon anode and have its structure be robust across many charge cycles. And then you can throw a little bit of silicon in there, and the silicon can kind of expand and contract inside the carbon matrix. But as you start adding more silicon, it gets harder and harder to maintain the structure of the anode.
Yeah.
Yes. So our highest energy density cells will use, I don't know, like 90% carbon, maybe 10% silicon or something like that.
Okay, so it's a small percentage.
It's a small percentage. And the silicon, you will have a bit more early life degradation in range with silicon. So it does get harder. There are much higher energy density cells you can get where if you have very precise construction of the anode, like with a chemical vapor deposition type process, and you sort of print it almost like a circuit board situation, such that the expansion can expand and contract without cracking, then you can get to like 50% higher energy density than we have in our cars. But that's very expensive. So it might be suitable for long-range aircraft, but it would not be economically feasible for cars. Yeah. So basically that situation, that's really the only thing holding back electric cars is range. So what I was going to be studying at Stanford for grad studies there was I'd be primarily in the material science group. Bill Nix would have been my professor. He's the guy I spoke to when I said that I'd like to put my studies on hold, but I will probably fail. So can I please come back if I fail or when I fail? And he's like, sure, but I don't think I'm going to hear from you again. And that was the last conversation I had with Bill Nix.
Oh, wow.
He was an oracle.
Yeah.
He knew.
He knew.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, but that's essentially what I was going to be studying at Stanford. This is back in '95. Was how to improve the energy density of how to solve the energy density problem for electric vehicles.
Oh, crazy.
Yeah.
So so like I'm not some like Johnny come lately to electric vehicles. The point is that I was thinking about electric vehicles like all the way back to high school. You know, like literally talking about it on dates at age 20. So I've been like a electric vehicle, proponent since like I was, a teenager basically.
Yeah.
So, and that's what I was going to be studying at Stanford is like how to make the cars go far enough that you don't on some energy storage system that you don't need batteries. So the idea that I actually had at Stanford was, which I think some others are trying to pursue at this point, but it isn't necessary, was to use advanced chip making equipment to develop a solid state capacitor with enough energy density to get 250 miles of range in a car. So, and the idea was that if you can piggyback on the process on advanced chip making processes where there's like tens of billions of dollars of R&D being spent every year to make chips that are precise at the molecular level, then maybe you can make a capacitor where you've got enough surface to volume ratio, and you can stop the electrons from tunneling across. If you make the sort of insulator too thin, that you'll actually quantum mechanics will make them teleport across, which is so it's not like things get weird at a molecular scale. Quantum mechanics is very weird. It's like my quantum mechanics course in physics in final year was harder than all of my other courses combined.
Wow.
So it's like it's intense.
What's your outlook on solid state? Do you think it'll ever get figured out?
Well, the solid state capacitors?
Yeah.
I think it's possible to make capacitors that are much better than what we have right now. And actually, I don't want to use the word graphene because it's used in bullshit context so often, but graphene may be an interesting, present an interesting avenue into creating a high energy density capacitor. So, like that could you'd have to have a lot of layers, and what you need is like something that is extremely resistant to electrons jumping the gap. So you need a great conductor, but also like effectively something that will basically drop the probability of an electron jumping the insulator to a low number. It will still, it's not going to be zero, but it needs to be a low number. Otherwise, your leakage current is going to be too high.
Let's just start with small problems like teleporting electrons.
When electrons are doing, the world is crazy at a molecular scale. The world is just like you cannot apply your normal intuition. So I think it gets super weird.
Spooky at a distance is what I've heard it called very, very well.
It's incredibly predictable from a probability standpoint. The quantum mechanics has unbelievable predictability. You just have to believe what it tells you, even though what it tells you doesn't seem to make sense at a macro scale. But anyway, I think that there's an opportunity out there to have a very high energy density capacitor. But that was the idea that's the idea that I had back then. But that's not to say that idea would have succeeded. The thing I could have found out after several years was I could have added some knowledge, like some leaves to the tree of knowledge, only to and get the PhD, but not, actually not practical. After all that,
we learned something and learned that this branch ended here. Maybe.
Yeah. So like one of the possible outcomes, a strong possibility would be, you spent all this time. This is not technically something that would work, but it is commercially not feasible and a waste of time.
Yeah.
And that would suck basically. So I figured that I could always. So that's why I decided in '95 to work on the internet. So like when I was in college, I was trying to think of like what other things that would most affect the future of humanity. Yeah.
So obviously you pursued multiple of those like choices, right? What would you say, like when you first joined Tesla, like everyone thinks that you weren't the founder of, everyone tries to correct you on that. He didn't found it. Like what did it actually consist of, right? Because I think a lot of people just think that someone else started it, you joined later and whatever, but obviously that's not true. So
that is not true. And the reason people think that is because Everhard has engaged in a nonstop campaign to try to effectively gain sole credit for Tesla for himself. And he's the worst person I have ever worked with, and that is saying something. Okay,
Yeah.
I've worked with some real assholes. Okay, so for somebody to be the worst person I have ever worked with, by far,
Yeah.
that's not easy, is what I'm saying. So the actual origin of Tesla uh, goes to 2003 when I had lunch with JV in El Segundo, and we got to talking about electric cars, and JV said, hey, have you tried the AC propulsion T0? I said, no, but we talked about battery technology and how the lithium ion would enable finally enable a long range car. I never heard of Eberhard at this point. Never heard of him. So then I got a test drive from AC Propulsion T0, and I was like, wow, okay, this is pretty cool. So at first I was like, well, can you guys just make me a T0? I'll buy one from you. And they didn't want to make another one. So I was like, okay. And I said, you guys should really commercialize the T0, because the T0 had all the properties that we later had in the Roadster. You know, it's sort of like 250-mile range, 0 to 60 under 4 seconds, or roughly 4 seconds. And it was a two-door, well, it didn't have doors, admittedly, the T0. But it looks, you can see a resemblance between the T0 and the Roadster. It's basically a small electric sports car. And so I was trying to convince the guys there to like commercialize the T0. It's like, hey, the world needs to see that it's possible to have a viable electric car. And at the time, I was obviously very much, working crazy hours at SpaceX trying to get a rocket to orbit, and we'd not yet reached orbit. So we'd not reached orbit until 2008 for SpaceX. So anyway, so then I kept hounding AC Propulsion to commercialize the T0. And then weirdly, they wanted to not do the T0, but do an electric Toyota Scion. Like truth is stranger than fiction. So I'm like, guys,
With hamsters dancing too.
I mean, the thing is, like, the batteries and powertrain at low volume are going to be very expensive, and so like no matter what, you would have to have like maybe a $70,000 or $80,000 electric Scion, or you could have, for argument's sake, $100,000 electric sports car. And people are willing to pay $100,000 for an electric sports car, but they are not willing to pay, let's say, $80,000. Like, you'd only save a small amount, because the battery pack and electric powertrain are overwhelmingly what is expensive. But I even said, listen, if you guys actually want to do an electric Scion, I will fund 10% of it, but you have to find other people who will fund the other 90%. And the only people who are willing to do 10% were me and Sergey Brin. And so then that project stalled. So then I sent I think it's Tom Gage an email saying, like, listen, if you guys are sure that you don't want to commercialize the T0, how about if you let me do that? So I was like, I'm going to start a company to commercialize the T0. So then Dan said, well, if you're interested in commercializing T0, he knows 2 other groups that are also interested in doing it, and would I like to meet them? I never met the second group, but the first group I met was Eberhard, Tarpening, and Wright. Now, Eberhard keeps trying to erase Ian Wright from history as well, because they hate each other. So but all they had was just basically, the plan was commercialized. There were no employees, there were no offices, there was no IP, there was no nothing, literally nothing. Yep. There was nothing you would call a company. He said, like, where is the company? I don't know, where is it? There was an empty shell corporation that had 0 value, and no employees, no offices, no designs, no intellectual property, no nothing. Except the general idea, basically, of commercializing the T0, which I had before meeting them. Like, if I had not met them, I would have just moved forward, created a company with JB,
Yeah.
commercialized the T0,
Yeah.
and gone on our way. And that's actually what happened at the end of the day,
Oh,
Oh my gosh.
except with a lot of grief along the way.
Yeah.
okay.
So, but in effect, after about a year, Martin Eberhard and Ian Wright could not stand each other, and they made me pick which one would leave. Basically, they can't both be in the same company, so I have to pick one of them. And then I talked to JB, and I was like, which is what's our least bad option here?
Yeah.
And it was like, okay, we'll say goodbye to Ian Wright and keep Martin. I mean, so. But anyway, like the key, I think the key point here is when somebody says like you're invested in a company, it's the money that I provided was the least important thing that I provided to the company. There was no company.
Mm-hmm.
And if I had not met them, I would have just moved forward and created Tesla, and I think it would be indistinguishable from what it is today. You would not be able to tell the difference. I think we could have avoided a lot of drama as well in the early days. So, yeah. I would if there's one thing I could go back in time and say, I wish I had never met Martin Eberhard.
So if you could go back in
He's the
time.
absolute worst.
Yeah.
In case I haven't made that clear.
Yeah, clear.
The worst. The worst.
May I ask?
Don't ever like yes.
May I ask? I know Kelvin.
Someone who claims credit for things he didn't do, and is obnoxious about it.
Yeah, so clearly, if you had a time machine, you can go back in time and not work with him.
Yes,
and
fantastic.
Yeah, exactly.
That would have, of course, saved a tremendous amount of anguish.
Yeah, and then just partner up with JB. The name Tesla and the logo means so much to so many of the fans of the cars. So, help us understand who came up with the name Tesla and what were some of the alternatives, and would Tesla be called Tesla had you and JB broke out together and not met Martin?
So the Tesla Motors, which is what it was called at the time, was the trademark was actually held by a guy I think who lived around Sacramento or something, and the trademark Tesla Motors was like I said owned by someone not us. So in the beginning it actually seemed like we would not be able to use. Steve Selleck, who came up with the Tesla Motors, the guy that we bought the trademark from, that guy. Not only did he come up with it, he trademarked it.
Oh.
Okay, so and we could not. He would not respond to anyone, any contact. So then finally, I sent Mark Topping, who is although he's Martin's best friend, is still a super nice guy, and. So I sent Mark Topping to sit on the guy's doorstep and not leave until we got the Tesla Motors trademark. So that's who came up with that. I forget his name, but it's in the trademark. You can look up the trademark history. That's who came up with Tesla Motors. That guy.
But you liked the name so much that you insisted that you sent Mark to sit on his doorstep, right? So
yeah. And I think we paid $75,000 for the trademark, which was a lot at that time.
Yeah, sure.
So, and I think it's also maybe important to emphasize, like, Martin Eberhard is quite a bit older than me and had successful startups before me and had a lot of money. He was just unwilling to risk it. He was not poor. He had a $10 million house in Woodside. Okay. He was just unwilling to risk his own money. I was not. I was willing to risk my own money. And in the end, I risked it all. So just important to emphasize, this is not like some poor inventor who gets crushed by big capitalist, which is the archetype that he tries to portray. He could have matched my investment if he wanted to. He just didn't want to.
At what point, through that, right, did you start to see the red flags, right? So you join with him, he's on board. Where's like? I
convinced JV to join. So the alternate path that I wish we had gone on was just if AC Repulsion hadn't mentioned that there were two other teams interested in commercializing the T0, then I would have just moved forward with JB, commercialized the T0 with a hell of a lot less drama. That's the path that I wish had occurred. the moral error that I made here is that I wanted to have my cake and eat it too. So I wanted to, like, it's like, okay, I need to do SpaceX, but I also really want to do an electric car company. How can I have my cake and eat it too?
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, if I have someone else run the car company and I will just be responsible for the overall sort of technology and design, like the product side of things. Like the thing that I enjoy doing is the product side of things, not being the boss. I don't like being the boss at all, but I like engineering and design problems.
Hmm.
So, um, so I thought, okay, I'll just work on the stuff that I like doing, which is product design, and then someone else can be CEO and deal with all the chores of being a CEO. This unfortunately did not work.
No, 'cause you had a CEO in place that didn't work out.
Well, no, yeah. Um, yeah, things finally came to a head um, in mid 2007, where Martin just flat out lied to me about the cost and readiness of the car. And I actually gave him an opportunity. I said, Martin, what is the cost of goods of the car? Like, how much is it? Like, what are we tracking to? And is it above the price that we are charging? And I actually knew the answer because an investor had joined who had audited the costs, and that investor told me like, hey man, the numbers he's adding up for the best case long-term cost of the Roadster is $180,000. I think we were like selling it for $85,000.
Ooh.
Yeah, so that's like
Huge.
yeah, you can't make it up on volume.
Yeah.
Using money, we're going to make it up at scale.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Rivian has that problem right now.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so basically I was like, well, this is extremely messed up. And he also said that like about the sort of new investor came in, said that about a third of the car works, about a third of the car is super late, and a third of it will never work at all.
Oh.
I'm like, okay, this is pretty bad. So I called Martin and said, like, Martin, what's the cost of the car? And he said he didn't know. So I'm like, okay, he's flat out lying to me. Because I asked, did you tell Martin this? And he said, yes, I told Martin this. So when I then called Martin and said, what's the cost of the car, Martin? Oh, I don't know. Are you sure? and when he did bold-faced lie to me, I was like, that's it. You know, he can't be CEO anymore. So we had a board meeting, and we fired him unanimously, including the people that he had appointed to the board.
Wow.
And at the time, we did not know the full extent of the situation. So we kept him on, like he was in the company, but fired as of July of 2007. And then I still didn't want to be CEO of the company, so I got like an interim CEO. But I was effectively, it's fair to say I was de facto CEO from July 2007 because in bringing in an interim CEO, this interim CEO did not know anything about cars. So I had to basically increase my time allocation to Tesla and help the new CEO figure things out. And this is all happening as we're sort of progressing into 2008. And it, I mean, I so badly didn't want to be CEO. Like to be clear, I could have been CEO from day one. It's not like I was like, I had like majority ownership on day one.
Yeah.
Yourself, yeah.
Yeah, because I'm now CEO. If I wanted to be CEO, I could have just made myself the CEO anytime I want. There's no need for any machinations or Machiavellian anything. I just could say, I vote me CEO, end of story.
Yeah.
So it's because I was trying to not be the CEO that things became problematic.
Yeah.
So we had an interim CEO for a few months, and then we did a CEO search in 2007, and the only person who was willing to say yes was Zev Drory. I don't know if you guys remember anything about Zev Drory. All right. So Zev is I like Zev actually. Let's just say like he is fearless. So the only one person who would agree to be CEO of Tesla was a guy who spent 3 years in the Israeli paratroopers, and was afraid of nothing. So Zev joined as CEO, but he, from a personality standpoint, his personality did not mesh well with the rest of the team. So after about 6 months of Zev being CEO, and me being de facto co-CEO, because again he didn't know anything about electric cars really. He was a technology guy from the chip industry. The team kind of had a revolt. Basically, they said, "Look, if Zev is going to continue to be the CEO, we're all going to leave."
Wow.
So they were like, I was like, okay. Then I was like, can you guys at least hang on for us to complete a financing round? So, because this is mid 2008, like July 2008, I was like, we just need to complete a financing round. Can you just, tough it out through then? And they're like, okay, we'll tough it out for a few more months. And then we tried raising money in basically summer of 2008, and we got term sheets, but the market started falling off a cliff around September of 2008. So the term sheets never turned into actual agreements to invest. And then a bunch of the investors who were thinking about investing in Tesla themselves went bankrupt. So it's not like, they're holding out on us. They themselves were just trying to figure out how not to go bankrupt. You had Lehman Brothers and Bear Stearns, bite the dust. And a bunch of the major banks would have bitten the dust too if there was not government intervention. So anyway, and Goldman was leading the round. So it became clear around September of 2008 that no round was going to happen. The markets were plunging. And then I told Zev, like, Zev, I'm going to have to put in everything I've got, all the money I've got left. So that means I have to be CEO. I've got to, putting all my chips on the table. And Zev said, he totally understands. So then I was like, okay. So like, technically, I was CEO from like mid 2007. You say like, officially CEO in like late 2008. Man, that was a lot of drama. That was a nightmare year. So, like partway through that year, SpaceX had failed its third launch. And I only ever thought we had enough money for 3 launches. So we were like 0 for 3 launches with SpaceX. My marriage had fallen apart, so I'm getting divorced. The Tesla financing round is falling apart, and we're nowhere near production. And we have the Great Recession. Party on.
Yeah.
Good times.
Yeah, doesn't get worse than that.
Perfect storm, man.
Yeah, extremely brutal, to say the least. The lowest of the lows. So then, that was pure hell. So,
Can I ask one? When you took over as CEO, this is a piece that a lot of people I don't think I've ever seen documented. Where was product development exactly? Like, how far along was the product in the making when you took it over? Because I think a lot of misconceptions. People have this idea that you showed up to a done product.
No, I oversaw the product from the beginning. So, like I mentioned earlier, my role was effectively like chief product officer. The thing that gets confusing is that normally someone who's chief product officer is not an investor. So people get confused, like, which one are you? It's like, I'm both. And the money was the investment was the least important part. It's just that I believe in putting your own capital at stake if you're going to start a company. Like whatever the opposite of other people's money is, I think is the morally right thing to do. So, like if you're not prepared to invest your money, then why should you ask others to invest theirs? It's not right.
Great.
That's why I invest. For my first company, Zip2, I had no money, so I could not invest in Zip2. That's why. No, like starting Zip2, which is like when I put grad studies at Stanford on hold in '95. I had $100,000 in student debt, and because I didn't start the Stanford quarter, that means I didn't have access to student housing. I lost my student stipend.
Yeah.
I mean, and I had like $2,000. So, and like more than $100,000 in student debt, and one computer. So, and that summer of '95, I wrote the first maps and directions and white pages and yellow pages ever on the internet.
Yep.
Personally, by myself.
It's insane.
Yes, it's insane.
95.
And they were like, well, what web server do you use? I don't use web server. I just read the ports directly. I don't have time to move data between one processor and another. I just read the port directly. Why do you need a server? Street port 8080. Problem solved. Anyway, but I didn't have any money. So when my brother came down, he had like $5,000. So that was like a gigantic improvement. Back in the zip 2 days, we found like a sort of an attic sort of office where there was like a hole in the roof and water like piled on the floor, and the rug was all stained. But I figured it doesn't rain that often in California, so we got like a discount rug from the nearby rug store, and then got like 2 futons, and then we just like sleep in the office and then remake it so it looked official during the day. And at one point, we still only had one computer, so like the website wouldn't work at night because I was coding at night, and the web server would run during the day. And the way we got internet access was there was an ISP on the floor below, so I just ran an Ethernet cable through the ceiling, drilled a hole in the floor, ran it through the ceiling tiles, and plugged it into the ISP below.
They never knew.
No, they did know.
They did know? Oh,
yeah,
okay.
but they're like, we'll give you a real cheap rate if you just plug in directly. So I didn't get like a permit or anything. I just drilled a hole in the floor and took the cable down and plugged it right in. So it was like, okay, we don't need buy a T1 or a router or anything from Cisco. Then when my brother came down, we managed to get a second computer. So then it could be like, okay, this one can run and I can code on the other one. Yeah, so this is like, that was, we didn't even have an apartment. We just would basically go shower at the YMCA on Page Mill and El Camino, which was like, pretty easy to walk to. So just to give you a sense of like how little money we had in the beginning. It was like nothing.
Yeah.
and eat at the Jack in the Box, if you know the Jack in the Box.
Yeah, but one thing I wanted to clear up was how did the journey of all of the founders like kind of taper? So obviously Everhard was fired.
Yeah.
What happened with JB and all the rest? Like how was like their journey and kind of their role even towards?
So, yeah, I mean, I think it's like it'd be accurate to say that there were like 5 co-founders of Tesla, and even though I despise Martin Everhard, he obviously would be one of those 5. And Ian Wright should also be considered one of the 5. Like essentially, like who was there, when the company basically had nothing, which was nothing, and that's the 5 people. Now the people that were like essential at the end of the day were JB and me. So there would not be a successful Tesla otherwise. It would never even have gone into production. And I think the evidence for this would be like, hey, we fired Martin, and gave him a bunch of money. Great, start a car company. He did try. It did not succeed. Yeah. So if you're so awesome, why didn't it succeed?
Yeah.
And why did nobody leave with him?
Yeah.
If somebody's awesome, so they leave, good people leave with them every time. Not one person left.
That's a tell right there.
Yes.
All of us have left companies and had team members follow us along. So if you can't do that as chief executive when everyone knew you, that's not a good sign for what you did there.
Yes. You're trying to figure out the truth of something. Who followed? Did no one follow? Okay. If he's a good guy and I'm the bad guy, why they'll stay with me?
Yeah.
They would.
Very clear.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And a top-notch engineer in Silicon Valley has like 17 job offers. They can work anywhere.
Yep.
So if they don't respect the person they're working for, they're just gonna work somewhere else. and frankly, people could have gotten way more money than Tesla was offering, and with less risk. So it's like, okay, so they could go work at, I don't know, Apple or something, and make more money with less risk, and they didn't. And Tesla today and SpaceX are rated the top places to go by graduating engineers.
Yep.
Why is that?
Yeah, it's very clear.
Yeah. So, yeah. So, like, just to be crisp about the timeline, the company and the people that deserve credit for the concept of an electric sports car are AC Propulsion.
Yeah.
And the T0.
Yeah.
So they deserve a lot of credit. Eberhard also will never mention them. So this is also a bad sign. It's like it's like it came from whole cloth in his mind. I'm like, no. The T0
Yeah.
from AC Propulsion, Tom Gage and Al Ciccone made an electric sports car. Then you took their idea and said, let's commercialize it. Yes, agreed. And independently, I also thought, let's commercialize it. And allegedly, there was some other team that also had the idea, let's commercialize the T0, because AC Propulsion was not willing to do it themselves. So, but from the beginning, I oversaw the product development. In fact, Eberhard blames me for a bunch of the issues with the car, saying, oh, the reason it was expensive was because Elon insisted on all these things about the car. It's like, okay, so if I was controlling the minutiae of the product design, but I also had nothing to do with it, which one is it? I can't be both. I can't be blamed for micromanaging the design of the car, but also have nothing to do with it. One of the two, these are incompatible.
Yep.
So I agonized over every inch of that car. I mean, the Pasadena School of Design gave me an honorary degree in because of my work on the Roadster. So that's how much I had to do with it, a lot.
Yeah.
But the issues, the problems with production. I actually wrote a piece. I don't know if you like it's out there somewhere. Early history of Tesla, like a blog piece. I don't know if you've seen it.
It's been a while.
I don't think I've seen it.
Yeah, you can probably drudge it up from the Wayback Machine or something like that. It's like the early history of Tesla, because I was trying to explain like just in detail how messed up things were.
Yeah.
So like the core product design for the car itself was, I think, compelling, but the business decisions around how to make it which Eberhard made were terrible. Among the many decisions that were insane were outsourcing battery production to a barbecue factory in Thailand. Yes. So I'm sure they make great barbecues. They didn't know how to make an advanced lithium-ion battery pack.
Oh my goodness.
Found a factory though.
But hey, it's factory. Yes.
Are we even sure if it was real, right? It's just
Literally. Yeah. So like the cells be made in Japan, then be shipped to Thailand, then be put into a battery pack, then go on a boat again to England to be put into a car, and then that car would then go on a boat again to California, which is the initial market. And so it was like this ended up being like a 5 or 6 month long supply chain. So if there was any problem with the cells of the pack, you'd have basically half a year's worth of inventory that you have to write off, and cars that didn't work, which is basically what happened. So the barbecue company in Thailand was just utterly unable to make a battery pack. They'd never done anything like it before. So much drama. Martin did not want to change the motor size or power electronic size from the AC propulsion design, which then therefore required having a two-speed transmission. Um, there were 3 attempts to make a two-speed transmission. They all failed. And I think on the order of $10 million was spent just trying to make a two-speed transmission. Um, After we fired Martin, I said we're just going to make the motor bigger and the power electronics bigger and get rid of the two-speed and just have direct, no transmission, just a direct drive. Need differential and an RPM reducer basically, but you no longer have to have a clutch. So we just made the motor bigger, power electronics bigger, got rid of the transmission. So then now no transmission in the normal sense of the word. When we first, for the very first cars that went into production, they still had that crappy two-speed transmission. It was just stuck in first gear. So it had like top speed of like 65 miles an hour or something like that. And with some chance of seizing. So, the body panels have been outsourced to a company that was completely unable to make carbon fiber body panels, and I, when I visited Lotus, I asked for their top 10 risks. They said, "Oh, your body panel supplier is going to fail." I'm like, "Excuse me?" And this was like a Friday. I'm like, "Well, let's go there right now." It's like Friday night. So we went to the body panel thing, and just like the tools were just the wrong. They were all wrong. They didn't fit. Like any given body panel had to be basically hand massaged, so like make it in the tool, and then it'd be wrong. The tool was wrong, and the process was wrong. So then you had to basically handcraft each body panel in order to make it vaguely fit. And even after that, the body panel gaps were so bad with the trunk that you could literally fit your thumb between in the gap. It was like messed up beyond belief. And I was like, wow, okay, these guys have a 0% chance of succeeding. Mm-hmm. So then we had to transfer the body panel production to this company, Sortera, in France. So then I ended up camping out in France for a few months there, just building new tools for the body. We had to retool the whole body. So Sortera was capable of making the body, but you still needed to retool the thing. So we had to retool the entire car body. So let's see. We changed the car body. The battery pack was I shifted production of the battery pack to Menlo Park, or basically to the Bay Area, technically San Carlos, I think at the time, and switched final assembly to the car dealership on El Camino, the Ford car dealership. If you watch Revenge of the Electric Car, you can see some of these scenes. So instead of having Lotus, so we'd make the battery pack in San Carlos, and then and also make the motor and power electronics. So I insourced production of the battery pack, the motor, and the electronics internal to Tesla, so we could iterate quickly and actually figure out a design that worked. Mm-hmm. So because design has to be safe, reliable, and not cost crazy money, or it doesn't matter. So so car body, motor, power electronics, transmission to a single speed. Almost everything got changed in the car. So we had to recapitalize the company, and it took about 2 years before we could actually be in real production, like from mid-2007 to mid-2009.
What was the original vision of the Roadster, though? I mean, you obviously had some production issues, but you had an initial vision once you conceived it. I mean, I know, retrospectively, you said that was a mistake to use the Roadster body because there were so many compromises that were.
Well, the Elise body, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the Tesla was created with two false assumptions. The one false assumption was that you could use the AC propulsion drivetrain technology, and that you could take a Lotus Elise and easily modify that to have an electric powertrain. So essentially, stuff the AC propulsion drivetrain into an Elise, have Lotus do the production, outsource everything. That's I think Martin thought the peak number of employees would be 35, like literally.
Wow.
Which this all sounds great, especially coming at it from like a mostly software background of me at the time. Like, great, sounds good, you know. Unfortunately, neither of those panned out. The AC propulsion technology was not viable in a production vehicle, and they used for example, analog power electronics. You know, so like depending upon what temperature it was, the car would either work or not work, or certainly work very differently. So we designed our own digital power electronics, and so the car would be consistent in how it performed. We ended up not using the AC propulsion motor design. We changed the motor design. We ended up not using any AC propulsion technology at all. So in that side of things, and then the problem with the Elise is that once you add a big battery pack to a car, the mass of the car is now like 40% heavier than an Elise. So you invalidate the entire structural design of the Elise. The battery pack wouldn't fit, so we had to stretch the chassis. The mass distribution is completely different. Like I said, all crash tests are invalidated. All the structural design is invalidated. You're essentially redesigning everything, but are still left with the constraints of an Elise, which is that it's a little too small. So that's an issue. You couldn't even use the air conditioning system because air conditioning was belt driven, so we needed an electric air conditioning system. So couldn't even use that. So in the end, the car was I think the car had maybe 4% or 5% of the parts in common with an Elise.
It's nothing.
Basically, it was worse than if we'd started from a clean sheet.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like if you say like you have a particular home in mind, but instead of building that home on a fresh piece of ground, you take somebody else's home
And stick what you want in it.
and then you knock down everything except one wall and the basement. And so you have the footprint and one wall, and you know, so you have to have like that sort of, and then you try to build your dream home but with somebody else's foundation. It's like not a good idea, and more expensive than if you just did a clean sheet.
Yep.
So that was an issue.
Did you ever consider midway through it dropping the body entirely, or was it just the capital sunk in already? Too late of an option.
What do you mean by dropping the body?
I mean, not using the Elise at all.
Yeah, I was like, at one point I told JV, I said, I think we should not work with Lotus, and we should build this directly. And JV was like, well, you know, we had no clue how to build a car. It's not like we just came out of this from, how do you build a car? No idea, you know, had to learn. So in theory, it's a car company that's been around for like 50 years. Should have a lot of expertise, more so than someone who's never built a car. So yeah, but because Lotus would have periodic financial difficulties, when they would have financial difficulties, they would then turn the screws on Tesla. So because if you're at Lotus and you have a choice of let's go raise money or let's extract money from Tesla, or they will extract money from Tesla. So they extracted a lot of money from Tesla, and we didn't have any choice. It was not possible to actually. We had no optionality. We're stuck. The only way to make the car was with Lotus. So when they increased the price on us, there's nothing we could do. But anyway, after all that, we managed to get the cost of the car down from where it was previously headed of 180,000 to, I think, around 80,000 by roughly mid 2009. But by redesigning and redoing basically the entire supply chain, with very few exceptions. It was like insanely hard to get the cost of the car below the price, and then we increased the price of the car, and I think we had like an average selling price of around maybe 110, 120. So we're able to get to like 25% margins, but with great difficulty, like hellishly difficult.
No one can say Teslas aren't appreciating assets. The Roadsters are still going for more than that today. So
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I know.
Still quite a collection of original Roadsters out there.
I was lucky enough to get my hands on 523.
Okay.
Yeah, beautiful. The electric blue, the one you guys repainted for the owner, because yeah, he told me the story about that. I guess he backed into a parking lot somewhere, and somebody hit him, and you guys repainted it for him. It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
Yeah, we had some pretty wild colors in the beginning, because the cars were just being made like one at a time, so it was you could make them be all kinds of interesting colors. We had a pretty vibrant orange color at one point. So, but like the production was excruciatingly difficult in the beginning. From the first set of tooling from that company that went bankrupt, that was completely unable to make car bodies, we were able to extract 5 car bodies, and each of those car bodies required extensive hand modification in order to and still looked like trash, basically, with giant body gaps and stuff. But there was only 5, literally 5.
Yeah.
So the first 5 production Roadsters have the body from the old tooling, and then we're able to transition to the Sortira. It's SOT-IRA, French company. Switch to bodies made with their tooling. And they did a great job, actually. But I remember having to talk the production team there into working a lot more than they would usually work. I mean, not that they're like they have a good work ethic, but they're like, I was like, can you guys please not go on vacation, because otherwise our company's going to die. Essentially, was my speech in a nutshell.
Yeah.
And they were actually like, okay, we'll stay and we'll make the car bodies. They were kind enough to actually postpone their vacations and stuff, and put in some serious hours to make the car bodies for Tesla at Sortira.
It's really cool.
Yeah, it's cool. So, and this guy Tim Watkins deserves a lot of credit as well. Tim Watkins was essential to making that work.
JB's role was critical. He made it so that the batteries didn't catch on fire anymore, right?
Yeah, JB was like, I mean, JB, Andrew Baglino, I mean, there were a number of really top-notch people there that solved the problem. I mean, it's not that the batteries wouldn't catch on fire, it's just that if a cell caught on fire, that it would not go into thermal runaway and domino the other cells. So I mean, in order for that to happen, we had to have liquid cooling to keep the cell temperatures even. And then you've got a tough problem where you want something to be thermally conductive but electrically isolated. So, these things normally go together. If something is thermally conductive, it is electrically conductive as well. So try to find some material to still cool or heat the batteries of the cells, but not create a short. This was quite difficult. And then the early packs for the Roadster were we did not scallop we did not have a wavy cooling tube, so we just had a straight cooling tube, so that there wasn't much contact between the cells and the cooling tube. Anyway, we made it work basically without too much drama. But it required a lot of iteration and making the battery packs ourselves in the Bay Area.
The most expensive place to build a car. I feel like on
A
the
very
planet.
expensive place to build a car, but actually cheaper than if it's outsourced to a barbecue company in Thailand because it actually works. So our initial designs for the pack were extremely wrong because it also has to be okay, in an accident. So it can't just it's going to be robust to an accident as well. So
During any point of those early days, like, was obviously bankruptcy was kind of almost knocking at the door. Was there?
bankruptcy actually technically was knocking at the door in like 2008, but not before then.
Okay.
Because I